Hey everyone, I'm Toby. You may have seen me around the franchise hockey manager community areas, the Discord, the forums, the subreddit. Um, I just wanted to make a video kind of going over a project that I've been working on for a few months now. And um, what you see on the screen here is that project, or at least what it's going to look like when you open the link that'll be provided with the video. What this is my attempt at applying some of the modern advanced hockey stats that we see in the current NHL to the stats that are given to us through franchise hockey manager. This is in no way meant to be a perfect recreation of those stats. It's just my attempt at using the resources that we have to produce something that allows us to quantify the value of certain players and compare them in a way that makes sense. So if you're watching this and you're familiar with the website Evolving Hockey, um, they kind of have been the primary inspiration behind this project for me, both in terms of uh, the way that they come up with their advanced hockey stats as well as how they display them. So if you're familiar with that website, then this should somewhat seem familiar to you. Um, so with that being said, I do want to give a big shout out to a couple community members. Melman on the Discord, as well as Blueberry. Both of them have been helping me kind of beta test this for a while now, and they're quick to let me know what bugs they find and help me get those fixed. They're also great at making suggestions about what to include in the sheet. So a lot of what you see here is from some back and forth with those two about how I can improve this and what would make it better. So big thanks to those two, and if you're starting to use this and you're finding things that you wish it had or um, recommendations on how to make it better, please let me know. I'd be happy to work with you guys to make this as useful as I possibly can. Um, so with all of that out of the way, I'll just start by showing you how to get the sheet set up so that you can use it. And then I'll kind of go through how each of these sections work. And then at the end, as long as the video doesn't get to be too long, I'll kind of go through how I get the numbers that I do and where all the math is coming from and how it works. So first of all, when you open it, there are going to be instructions on the very first tab. This will go through everything, how to get it working, and then how to use that advanced metrics page, and then an explanation of the stats that are displayed. I'm going to go through all that in the video though, just so that it's clear. So you'll start in your game. I recommend if you're going to export your data early in a season, uh, play at least 20 games. The reason for that is a lot of the stats are based on players who have a minimum of 60 minutes of ice time. And I find that 20 games is deep enough in to where most guys who are going to be playing regularly have hit 60 minutes. So I export 20 games in, 20 to 30. I export at the trade deadline and I export at the end of the season. Those are the kind of three main points where I want to do my analysis of the league, and that allows me to look at how players are doing as I go from each of those points to the next, in case I'm looking to make a trade or move some people around on my own lines, things like that. So what you'll do is when you get to that point, I'm at the end of my season here. Actually, I'm through the playoffs. Um, but I already exported the save, but I'll just show you quickly. You click on World and then Export CSV. When you do that, it'll drop all of your files into your save folder on your PC. Um, so you'll go to the import export folder of your saved game. So save game, GM Toby, import export, CSV, and then all the files will be here. I put mine into folders based on when they're exported. That's just so that I can kind of keep them straight, and then I clean it up every new season because I don't really have a desire to look back at prior seasons with the way I use it. But this is what you'll see in that CSV folder. And what you're going to do is come to the spreadsheet, and you'll go to each of these tabs at the bottom through Skater Stats RS, and you're going to import your CSV. To do that, click Import, over to Upload, and then you'll upload the corresponding CSV. So for Team Stats, we're uploading the CSV called Team Stats. When this pops up, click Replace Data at selected cell. Make sure you have cell A1 selected. Custom, the separator type, and type a semicolon. Import. And that's it. That's all you have to do for each of these. I'm going to go through and do them all just so that you can see how it goes. Team records is next. There is a certain point along here when you start getting to the player master ratings and skater stats. Those are large spreadsheets. And as a result, the data can take a while for Google Sheets to start recognizing it and filling it in, and things will start to get very slow and laggy. What I recommend, and I'll show you when I get there, is to refresh the page after every new import. And I'll kind of explain why that's the case when you start to get to this this laggy section. So player master is the first one that's going to be difficult. Let's see, playermaster.csv. So this is a 7.9 megabyte spreadsheet file. This is every single player in the game and their biographical information. Place, custom, semicolon, import. Now it's going to hang for a while. So what's happening is, as it fills in this information, the formulas that I have in the spreadsheet are starting to get the data that they need to produce the numbers, but it's not all of the data. So that it's continuing to look for information that isn't there, and that just really slows down Google Sheets. So what I recommend is, once this dialog box disappears, the data has been saved to Google Sheets. It's not showing anything here. It's still loading it all in, but it's there. What you can do is click on your next tab and refresh the page. What that does is it kind of stops everything from trying to continue loading, and you can move on with getting your CSVs brought in to the spreadsheet. If you don't do that, it can really kind of slow things down and feel like you're gonna crash your browser. Speaking of which, you might get to a point, and I might still get to it here. Usually by the time I get to the stats is when it happens. Chrome will pop up and say the page has stopped responding. You can either wait or exit. I recommend exiting, because by the time that pops up, the data is there. Your spreadsheets have been imported. You can just refresh, clicking exit page and then reloading it will pick up right where you left off. Not something to worry about. If for whatever reason your import does get corrupted, just start over. It's not a huge deal. At this point, it's probably good to mention that there are limitations to Google Sheets in terms of the number of cells that each project can have. That being the case, Franchise Hockey Manager exports in its CSV data all of the information for the leagues that you have selected when you started your save. So if you have every single league selected when you start, this is not going to work for you, because you're going to hit the cell limit on the project before you get all of your data even imported. There is a lot of information that comes out of the Franchise Hockey Manager CSVs. So if that's the situation, for now, the solution is to open the file in Excel and clear out players who are not in the NHL. Stuff that is unrelated to the NHL, or whatever league that you're in, I guess is the better way to put it. Whatever league you're in, if you can clear up some data, delete cells, that will just help you bypass that. The sheet Google is going to work just fine. Mailman is currently working on tool that will clean up these sheets. It's not ready yet. There are still some things that we have to, or that he has to work out with that because of how the CSVs are produced. But once that is working, I'll certainly leave a link to it with the spreadsheet, and you'll be able to use that to clean up files. Looks like I am frozen. Let's try and refresh. It's crazy. I did this 3 times prior to making this video and did not have any issues when it came to importing. Okay, so we have our player ratings in now. And you can see there I just refreshed. That prompted Google to tell me it was not responding. And last one is the regular season skater stats. Now, for this one, I want to show you, make sure that you're clicking player skater stats RS, not retired career stats or career stats RS. We only want the information for the most current season. That one in, place it selected, custom, semicolon. Let's hope this doesn't freeze on me. Looks good. Once that's in, go ahead and go to your advanced metrics tab, refresh just to be safe, and everything should start loading. The only thing that might have an issue is the player ratings, but it looks like that isn't the case. Everything is working as intended. So this is how it's going to look to get everything loaded up for your save. We'll start on the left side and work our way over. So first up, luckiest and unluckiest teams. These are the teams in your league who are given an expected points value. This is based on how many goals are needed for 1 point in the standings based on the goals scored by your entire league. Okay, that's a little it might be a little confusing when you hear it that way, but yeah, it's just some simple math used to figure out how many goals are equal to a single point, and then it looks at every team in the league at how many goals they scored and decides how many points they should have as of that moment when the save is exported. And then the actual points are displayed here, how many points they actually achieved. So luckiest teams are teams that had actual points higher than their expected points, and the width of that margin, top 5, is displayed here. So you can see Calgary was expected to only have 79.8 points based on the number of goals scored by the team. They actually had 93, so they were the luckiest team in the NHL. What that means to me in terms of analyzing a team is that their defense is really strong, that they were able to win more games with fewer goals. And then vice versa, we have the unluckiest teams. These are the teams who their projection had them at a certain number and they fell well below that. So San Jose was almost 20 points below their expected. That means that they scored enough goals to get 93.5 points. However, they only ended up with 74, meaning their defense is not good. They scored a lot, but they let in more. So their offense was not a problem. Their defense certainly was. Then you have your team here, and this is the team that you're viewing. You can pick any team in the NHL. This is set up currently to only work with standard NHL leagues. Once everything is kind of the foundation is laid, I plan to make this compatible with custom leagues and leagues other than the NHL. Right now, just know that you're gonna be able to use it with NHL teams unless you know your way around Google Sheets and mess with it. The team that you select will have their stats here, so if they're not in the top 5 luckiest or unluckiest teams, you can still see their expected points. See my Minnesota Wild, pretty much right on track. And you can change it to look at any team in the NHL. Then you have the league leaders in a couple different stats. We have forward wins above replacement and defensive wins above replacement. That's for each position. You can see the WAR for each player, and go into WAR a little bit later when we get down to the advanced stats. We also have expected goals, players with the highest expected goals on both forward and defense. It looks like these aren't changing right now. See if this bar is still here, calculating formulas. What I'd recommend doing is just clicking through some of these pages. Whoa, it's not good. It's not accurate either. Just click through and this will start loading them in. Once the information starts to show up, everything will start working again. See, there you go. Now when we change these, yeah, perfect. Sometimes you just have to click the tab to open it, and then you can go right back, and you're not gonna have the problem of it not loading players. So we can see the expected goals for both forwards and defensemen, and then the wins above replacement for forwards and defensemen as well. And then here is the team leaders. So whatever team you have selected, you can take a look at who's leading in wins above replacement, wins above expected, expected goals per 60 minutes of ice time, and then this Tibbs percentage. Again, I'll get into that when we start looking at all the stats. Then on the right side, we have line comparison. So this will take all 4 lines for the team, and you can do kind of their aggregated stats. We have their expected goals, and then per 60 expected goals and goals against per 60, both expected and what they actually gave up. Wins above replacement, Tibbs percentage, Corsi 4 percentage, Fenwick 4 percentage, goals 4 percentage, and shooting percentage. So I'll start going through these, and then you have the same for the defensive pairings as well. So each of these stats, the expected goals, that is how many goals a player is expected to have at that point based on his offensive statistics. So you can see here when we're looking at the whole line, this is the sum of Kaprizov's expected goals, Rossi's expected goals, and Arvidsson's expected goals. So this line was expected to score 98.5 goals, and that is always at even strength. This doesn't consider power play, shorthanded goals. It's only even strength goals. So they were expected to score 98.5. They scored 99. They're right on pace. Their expected goals per 60 again is at even strength, and this is just essentially the expected goals scored per 60 minutes of ice time for all 3 of these guys. It's their individual expected goals per 60 added together, and then their actual goals per 60. So spot on. Expected goals against. This is determined by taking the league-wide goals against, and then using a linear regression to figure out defensively what is the expected goals to be scored based on their time on ice, their hits, their takeaways, their blocked shots, things like that. So you can see they were expected to give up 3.4 goals per 60, and they actually gave up 4.2. This is a bad defensive team. My team we finished first in our division, but we gave up a ton of goals. A big part of that was the goaltending, but that's all beside the point. Just know that that's kind of how you should look at these. And these are because goals against is an on-ice statistic, not an individual statistic. These are averages for the 3 players rather than a sum. So expected goals, you add everyone together. For expected goals against, you're taking the average for each player, because if all 3 are on the ice for 1 goal against, that is 1 goal against, not 3. So you wouldn't add them, you would average them. Wins above replacement you're familiar with WAR in baseball, it's pretty much the same concept here. I take the 23rd percentile for offensive and defensive statistics to determine a replacement level player and their expected goals, and then their expected goals against. You subtract goals against from goals, and then you divide that by a coefficient that is the ratio of goals to wins, again, based on the number of goals scored within your league and the number of wins that those goals are then worth. You then figure out how many wins are equal to the number of goals scored by a replacement level player, and then you do that same calculation on everyone on your team, subtract the replacement level player stats from your player stats, and you're given the wins above replacement. That is, wins that they got above what a bottom tier player would have. When you look at WAR for a line and it's a negative, that means that a replacement level player likely would have improved the wins that this line achieved. Now, keep in mind, replacement level players are not 0. So don't look at this as they lost 9.1 games for us. It's not really the case. They just didn't get 9.1 wins, if that makes sense. It's a hard concept to wrap your head around. Just know that a replacement level player is not 0 wins. Usually it's around -3. Again, that doesn't mean that they lose 3 games for you. That's just the number, the baseline number. It's not, the floor is not 0. So looking at a negative WAR for a line that did this well, again, it comes down to these goals against, because you're taking the goals scored minus the goals against. So a team that gives up more goals than they score is going to have a much lower WAR. And these guys gave up a lot more goals than what they were expected to score, and as a result, they ended up with a negative WAR. TIBS percentage. This is TIBS stands for takeaways increased by blocked shots. This is just my own little metric that I use by adding a player's takeaways and his blocked shots and dividing it by the Corsi against for his season. So basically what that tells me is that this line, for example, again, this is an average or a sum because it's all individual stats. These three together disrupted 13.79% of the offensive chances against them, because a Corsi against is a shot attempt taken against them. However, if they have a takeaway or a blocked shot, they disrupted that offensive chance. So it's not perfect, but it just gives a general idea of whether a line is maybe a little bit more defensive than another. And this works on an individual player basis as well. Corsi 4, Fenwick 4, those are already in Franchise Hockey Manager. I just needed to kind of fill out the chart a little bit. You can look up what those are if you're interested. Goals for percentage, what percentage of the goals scored for this team when these guys were on the ice, and then their shooting percentage. Again, individual shooting percentage combined. Actually, no, that one would be an average. Not really sure. I suppose, yeah, that one should be an average. On average, their shooting percentage, 14.5% of their attempts go into the net. Okay, same numbers for defense. Obviously, the TIBS for defensemen is going to be much higher because they throw more hits, get more takeaways. So you can kind of see that in action. But everything else is the same. Oh, I'll get this changed, but this should be even strength goals, not just Okay. Now coming down to the player comparison. So this section here allows you to say you want to take a look at players who are on different lines. Maybe you want to compare the three right or left wings for Minnesota Wild. So they have Mikey Milne, Matt Boldy, and Kirill Kaprizov. Come here, Kirill Kaprizov, Mikey Milne, and Matt Boldy. And now you can take a look at these three different categories of stats. So we'll start with box score, and then we'll go through the other ones. Now this is where, if you're familiar with evolving hockey, this is gonna start to look like what you know. So box score, these are the quantifiable stats that a player has at the end of the year. We know how many games he played, we know how much time he had on ice, we know how many goals he had, how many assists. Those added together give you your points, obviously. Shots on goal per 60, shooting percentage, block shots, giveaways, takeaways, hits, and penalties in minutes. So box score stats, nothing special there. All of that is already in the game. I just need it here so that you have something to compare to. Next, we have our GAR and XGAR. GAR, like WAR, is goals above replacement. Same process that's used to determine WAR is used to determine goals replacement level player. That's part of the WAR. Since I already have it, I figured I might as well use it. So we have the expected goals above replacement, and then the actual goals above replacement. Again, this is expected as of the date that is exported. This isn't going to tell you if you export it 20 days in. It's not going to tell you what the player's expected GAR is at the end of the season. It's just up to that point. So as the year goes on, these numbers are likely going to increase above the replacement level. And again, always even strength. Anything above replacement is even strength. Anything projected is even strength. Expected goals. You can see here, I then have the even strength goals next to it. So you can immediately compare how someone did, how their performance was compared to how it was expected to be. So for goals above replacement, Milne had a higher expected GAR than what he actually achieved. However, his expected goals were similarly 1.5, same amount, above what he actually scored. So that's where that number comes from. But you can still see that it was pretty close. He was 1.5 goals short of where we projected him to be. And then again, compare expected goals per 60 to actual goals per 60. Same process that's used to figure all this out is also used to figure out per 60 stats. And then we have the expected WAR and WAR for a player, and then WAX is their wins above expected. Basically just the difference between these two. And then we have SPAR, expected SPAR, SPAR, and SPAX. SPAR is standing points above replacement, so same process that's used to determine the expected points for teams in the NHL. You can apply that to players as well and figure out how many standing points a particular player is worth. And then we can project that. We have an actual amount, and then the difference between the two. And then the on-ice statistics. So earlier when I was talking about individual versus on-ice, sum versus average, for the on-ice statistics, these are where you're going to look at averages, how the team performed when this player is on the ice. Looks like the Tibbs percentage here is going to be the individual player's Tibbs percentage. That would be the only one that's kind of out of doesn't follow that rule that it's when the player's on the ice. Team performance when the player's on the ice, and that's just because Tibbs, I used to calculate it in a way that was that looked at the team as a whole rather than just the individual player. I've since changed how I do that, but it still is fallen under this on ice category. And I think that pretty much covers everything. So that goes over what the sheet does, how it works. We're, oh man, almost exactly 30 minutes. That goes through everything that you're going to see. When it comes to actually using this information, Um, if you're unfamiliar with advanced stats, think of it as a way, at least the way that I try to use them, is not to compare your highest level talents to everyone else, right? You don't need a complex spreadsheet to tell you that Connor McDavid is a better forward than Noel Achari, right? You don't need advanced stats to tell you that. Um, However, when you're looking at your team, you've got your third line and your fourth line. How do you know if your third line left wing is better than another team's third line left? Right? You don't. Their goals are going to be about the same because they spend about the same amount of time on the ice. You don't know how much offense those left wings are really contributing, and whether one maybe should be playing on the second line versus the third line. Uh, there's no good way to compare them, and so that's what this attempts to do is give you the tools necessary to compare depth players and build upon your team's depth by getting that extra win or that extra standing point uh, from one player to the next. So um, it'll take some getting used to. Like I said, I export my saves at the end of every season, 20 games into the next season, and then at the trade deadline. And I do that so that I can watch the progress throughout the year and see where some guys are maybe starting to fall apart or fall below expectations, and make adjustments as I go. I've had it be tremendously successful. I've had it blow up in my face. Um, One of the great examples that I had was in the first or second season of this save. I replaced one of my depth spots with Justin Danforth, who was a player in Columbus that really was struggling there. And looking at his numbers, I could see, well, he has a high expected WAR, but his actual WAR is well below that. What's going on here? And I looked at the team and figured, okay, his individual performance should be helping his team win, but the teammates around him are preventing him from doing that. So I made a trade for Justin Danforth, brought him onto my team, and sure enough, by the end of the year, he was right around where he had been projected to be, contributing offensively, keeping the puck out of the net defensively, uh, and ended up having a great season with my team instead of his prior one, even though, you know, looking at his star rating and his game rating, the things that are in the game, I wouldn't have looked at him as a good replacement for, my fourth line right wing. But it turns out he was exactly what my team needed, a 2-star, 2.5-star, I forget, ability player on the fourth line, but absolutely brought wins to my team. Made a deep playoff run, ended up winning the cup that season, and he had a great playoff performance as well. Noel Achari, uh, on the other hand, is someone who I picked up looking at his stats, thinking, okay, maybe he's in the same boat as Danforth. No, he's just bad. But that's how it goes. You're not going to get, this isn't a cheat code, right? This isn't going to give you the right answer every time. It's just a way for you to evaluate players in a different way, than how you might be doing that in the game already. And if you're still kind of hung up on things and not really sure how to use the tool that way, let me know, and I'd be happy to make another video kind of going over how I uh, uh, use this in my game. Okay, so that pretty much covers everything. I'm going to end the video here. I won't get into how I come up with all these numbers. If you're interested, let me know on Discord or on Reddit or on the forums, and I'd be happy to talk through my process. If you want to look through some of these other tabs, you can kind of see that how it's done in here. The regression models is where you're going to want to look for most of the projections. Um, Utility page isn't really going to have much information. Oh, if there are stats that the game exports, but that you're not seeing in here, say you want to know how many shorthanded goals someone has, you can go to your active roster stats page. Always can come here, and all of the stats that are exported from the game are going to be in here. I think up until, let's see, yeah, up until position, that's where I start adding. There's some hidden rows here that you can unhide and take a look. If there's a stat that you want to know for a player that I don't display, um, you can always refer to the active roster stats page. Um, but yeah, that pretty much covers everything. I'll just go to a different team here to show you that it still works. Um, not just for the sort of Wild. You can see all the lines for any of these other teams, defensive pairings. Uh, there's no way for Sheets to automatically switch these drop downs to the new players on the new team, so you'll always get errors when you switch teams. But just go through and pick guys that are actually on that roster, and they'll show up here. Okay, I think that covers everything. If you run into any issues, let me know right away. I'll push fixes as often as I can. I did realize about halfway through here that I messed this up, and what I should have done was click File, Make a Copy before importing all my stuff. So now the public document that I share with people has all of my game data in it, but I'll clear all that out before I post this again. Um, yeah, that pretty much covers everything. So if you have any questions, any suggestions, any issues, please let me know. But until then, have fun. Let me know how it works for you. Thanks, guys. Take care.